Good morning, friends. Welcome back to Kids Time. I'm so glad that you joined me again this morning. I'm Rebecca, the Children, Youth, and Family Director here at St. Paul Lutheran Church in Missoula. And I'm coming to you from right up front at the playground at St. Paul. It's so good to be here. Today, in our church service, we heard a verse from the Bible that maybe you recognize. It's one that people say a lot, and some people, a lot of people, even say is their favorite verse. Maybe you already know which one I'm talking about. But I brought some things to help us figure out what that verse might be and why it's important. So I have some things that I'm going to show you, and I want you to think about, what do all of these things have in common? What's the same for every one of them? Okay? So think about that. What is the same for all of these objects? Okay. The first ones, actually a couple of, are these beads. See here, the green one and a red one, orange one, the purple one. They're so small you can barely see them in my fingers. So the first thing we got is those little beads. Then I brought this. Do you know what these are? Maybe if I go like this, it'll make them easier to see. Yeah, they're Post-it notes. And they're a lot smaller than the Post-it notes that I'm used to. Okay, so we got little Post-it notes. The next thing I brought are mini dog treats. Yeah, they're pretty little. They're not very big, just little tiny treats. So we have mini dog treats. The last thing I brought is this tape measure. But this tape measure it's not quite as big as I'm used to. Usually they're pretty big, right? So I brought this little tape measure. Now, did you notice? What do all of those things have in common? What's the same for all of them? What's the same? Well, they're all mini. They're all smaller versions of big things. So think about these beads, these teeny tiny little beads. How big are beads usually? Well, maybe they're this big. So these are definitely small. And for the Post-it notes, how big are Post-it notes usually? Well, they might be like this big. So these are definitely smaller. And dog treats. How big might dog treats be? Well, they can be all kinds of sizes, but you know, they have some that are like this big. That's a lot bigger than these. And then our tape measure. This is pretty tiny. A tape measure is usually like this big. Now wait a second. What do mini things, miniature things, have to do with our gospel today? Well, that special verse that I was talking about earlier, it's John 3:16. And that verse, we can kind of think about it like a mini gospel. It's got all of the things that the gospel has, this truth about Jesus and God, and it's all compressed into just one verse. So let's say it together. Maybe you know it already, but I'll say it once, and then we can all say it together. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Let's say it together. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Great job. So even though that's just one verse, we can think of it as sort of a mini gospel. It summarizes the whole gospel into just one verse. Now, you miss some details when you just say one verse. There's lots more to read and learn in the whole gospel. But this one verse can be really helpful, and we can even memorize it. So just like our teeny tiny mini objects today, all of these things, you can still use them, right? And they might be easier to carry around. Like this tape measure. There's even a little keychain on it, so it's easier to carry around. And maybe this mini gospel, John 3:16, might be easier to carry around in your head. So this week, with your parents' help, I would challenge you to memorize this verse, John 3:16. Maybe we should say it again, just to really get it in our heads. All right? Say it with me. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. And if you really want a challenge, you could replace all of those he and him words with the word God. Because we know that God isn't just a he or him. God is all of the pronouns. And God is beyond pronouns. So I would challenge you to try and replace those words once you learn it. Replace he and him with God. Well, thank you, friends, for joining me again today. And I hope that you can memorize the mini gospel, John 3:16, so it's easier to carry around in your head. All right, friends, I'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.